Alright, welcome back to Art for O.U.R. I'm Dan Preece, your garage dwelling, slightly crazy artist. Rope. This is a weird one. I've always been fascinated with rope. I grew up on a farm in Utah in the United States, and we didn't have a ton of money, and so everything we had you used 1,000 times until it wore out. And of course that included rope. We even made our own rope out of baling twine that comes on bales of hay. You know, that red plasticky stuff. We made bow and arrows out of twine and rope we could find. So I always loved rope. I grew up in the Boy Scout program, graduated as an Eagle Scout, so we had to learn our knots and did lots of camping. And so this project has so much meaning. I mean, that's just scratching the surface. And I have to rob somebody during at least one part of my project, and this was my teenage daughter donating hairspray. I think she's forgiven me. I wanted this piece to symbolize a couple of things. That point in your life, which a lot of us get to, where we're hanging on by a thread, and then that point in your life, which I hope you're lucky enough to experience, where everything seems as strong as it could possibly be. The other side of this vase being a very strong knot. And you'll notice the rope never ends. There's no break in the rope. At least that's what it's made to look like. So you could run with this analogy all you want, but you know, maybe there's somebody watching this that is just barely hanging on by a thread. And I can tell you from personal experience dealing with depression, anxiety, and whatnot earlier in my life, that all you have to do is hang on. Things will get better. I hate to get religious on you, but there is power in prayer, and there's power in finding out what God's plan is for you. And I will, testify that his plan's a whole lot better than anything you have imagined. Mine certainly has turned out that way. You just got to keep one footstep in front of the other, keep going on, keep hanging on, and you'll find the other flip side of your life is incredibly strong and good and enjoyable. So hang in there. I used the hairspray to keep this thing splayed out. I wasn't sure how I was going to keep it from moving around. And it turned out by the time I got this thing unraveled that it was so bushy you could hardly see what I was getting at. So I had to trim it way back. The wood piece comes from a massive willow tree that died in my yard. I'd rather should say it was mostly dead when I moved into my place. This thing was huge. It's probably 4 feet across at the base. Big, huge tree. It turned out that the entire base was rotten and was just about to fall over, so we cut it down and I saved a whole bunch of it. It's got some lovely grain in it. You never know what you're going to get. Different parts of this have different colors in it. I made some big benches out of the really big parts, and it had some just unbelievable, beautiful grain. So I love to get into these pieces and see what I can find. The other thing that's really odd about willow wood is sometimes the pieces are incredibly hard. I mean, just impossible to turn. And this turned out to be one of those. Other pieces have been really, really soft, and maybe they're just different stages of rotting, for all I know. But this one was hard. I used my carbide tip on a lot of it. The first part wasn't too bad, but after I got resin into it, it just turned into a crazy difficult challenge getting anything to go on the lathe. So my aggressive big carbide tip usually saves the day in cases like that. I have a massive wood pile in my backyard, and trees like this were chopped up initially with the intent to have kind of emergency backup firewood for uh, lighting a fire in our little stove we have in our house should the electricity go out in the middle of the winter. Here in Utah, we get 2 or 3 months of bitter cold at times, and so I've always been wanted to be prepared. So that was years ago, and I just got into wood turning a couple of years ago, and so by the time I realized that you should prepare wood and seal the ends and keep it from cracking, that ship had sailed for almost everything. So that's fine. I because of what I'm doing, the cracks and that instability of it don't matter at all, because by the time I get to a point where the tailstock that pushes on the other side of the wood that keeps it safe, by the time I can't use that anymore and I'm hollowing out a bowl, I've usually dunked it in resin, which really, really stabilizes any areas of the wood that are rotten or cracked or unstable, and it adds character to it. With the recent method I've been using for stabilizing my wood with resin in a vacuum chamber and then a pressure pot, it gives it kind of an aged antique look, which I've been digging lately. So we're going to keep going with that. Big thank you to my sponsors. Laguna Lathes has donated 2 lights now, worth not a small amount, and it makes my task of filming what I'm doing a whole lot easier. These are big boom arms, probably, I don't know, 4 feet long or more, and I can get the light where I need it from both sides. They mount on the lathes, and they're incredibly well built, so they are, indestructible as things fly around and as I'm manhandling them. Other sponsor is Total Boat. They have donated a large amount of resin in the last year or two. My go-to is the Fathom Deep Resin. If you go to totalboat.com, you can get a discount if you use the code Preece, Preece. It's in the description of the video. Anyway, go there, say thanks on my behalf. That would be appreciated. They are largely what makes the fundraising that we're doing here possible. Since resin is so expensive, they've really helped our budget out and helped us donate a whole lot more to Operation Underground Railroad. Operation Underground Railroad, if you're new to the channel, they are a group that goes around the world, either funding police departments or aiding them, or staging sting operations themselves, trying to find kids who are stuck in child sex trafficking situations. Strange topic to be thrown out in a wood turning channel, but that is the point of this channel. Besides my love of working with wood and resin and creating artistic pieces, the other part is to help fight this problem. Unfortunately, it's a worldwide phenomenon that is growing rapidly, especially with the COVID-19 shutdowns. There's a huge spike in this stuff. It's horrible stuff, but are different groups around the world that are fighting it back, and this is one of them, and I've dedicated a lot of my free time to raising money to aid them in their fight. So you can do a lot of things to help. You can buy the pieces I make. You can use the link to the Amazon website. If you use the link in the description or at artforour.org and do any of your Amazon shopping, just your regular shopping, a percentage of that goes to Operation Underground Railroad. So every time you go to Amazon, go through that link. You'll help me raise money. You can be a paid subscriber to this channel, a couple of bucks a month. Adds up. I think we're coming up on 30 of those so far. We're about to hit 20,000 subscribers, which is amazing. And can you imagine if everybody pitched in a couple of bucks every month, we could do some serious damage and help out these folks. My lifesaver here is duct tape and super glue, CA glue. In hindsight, I wished I'd positioned this rope a little differently, but of course you don't think about that till it's over. There's always some criticism in my mind of how we could have done this better, but in the end I was actually pretty happy with how this turned out. I hadn't really worked with rope and resin before. I did a yarn bowl where we did something similar to this, so similar beast, and I learned that hairspray is way better than mousse. Little fact you probably don't need to know, but hairspray went a lot further. Anyway, Starbond's has been one of my other sponsors. And if you go to their website and use the code Preece15, that's Preece 15, you can get a 15% discount on all their super glues, which are my go-to for sure. They got really thin ones to help stabilize bark and unruly bits of wood, and really thick ones to help with projects like this. And you can order a quick set spray on that helps it set really fast, and so you can bust through a project like this with each time you put it on. The glue will set up, within seconds, which is awesome. I don't think you could come up with a dirtier, messier pastime. I've got 3 boys from 12 years old down to 6, and I pay them every Saturday to clean up my mess. And they do a pretty good job. Usually when I start these projects, you'll look down on the floor and it's pretty clean. And by the time I'm done, I'll be standing in 6-8 inches of sawdust, depending on how big the project is, how many projects I've done. I usually use my sawdust. I have a small bit of forest behind my house where we've created a bunch of trails, and I like to line the pathways with the sawdust. If it's got resin in it, of course it goes in the garbage, but messy business. I usually have to wear a turtleneck or something similar to keep the sawdust from going all through me. One thing I struggle with on this is how to make the last remaining fiber of rope look like it was tight, even though it was going around a bend. I think I accomplished it more or less, but this thin Starbond glue is fantastic. You squirt it in there, you can't even see it, it's transparent, and got things to the point where I wanted it. Big thank you to Jim Sondergaard. He bought this vase before I even listed it. He said, I want your next one, or he said at least he'd like to consider it, and he, sure enough, bought this thing before I could even get this listed. I can't tell you how much that means to me to have my work supported, not just because of the cause I've taken up, but, as a fledgling artist, it's scary to put your stuff out there and not know if you're ever going to sell anything, which I know happens to a lot of people. My wife is an oil painter, and over the years I've watched her slowly build her business. It's not easy. Starving artist is not a loose term. It's the real deal. And we've had so much success at Art for O.U.R. selling artwork, different crafting things, and it's been a wonderful thing. So thank you for that, Jim. All right, I'm going to go out there and claim I have solved the resin bubble thing once and for all. These are my two beauties. They're a 15-gallon pressure pot and vacuum chamber. The pressure pot came with this liner that fits inside it perfectly with handles, which solves so many problems. So here's the process. Wrap the project with corrugated plastic, super glue it around there, cut lines in it so you can create fins and overlap it and contour it to the shape of the project perfectly, then glue it all together. Then double, triple bag it in some cheap garbage bags, stick it in the pot, and get everything snug as a rug. Pack sand around it as much as you possibly can. And what you're doing is creating a cheap, very cheap mold for your projects. And this way you prevent the waste of resin as much as you possibly can. I mean, this thing's skin tight by the time you're done, and it's been a very, very good model. So you run it through the vacuum chamber. I don't do it for too long, about an hour, and that gets rid of a lot of bubbles, micro bubbles. It gets rid of air deep inside wood. With the defect wood I use, it really helps get the air out of the cracks. And as you increase the pressure back, the air that was expelled is replaced by resin deep in the wood, which stabilizes everything. Which is a really important step because I've had so much trouble with streaming bubbles coming out of cracks and deep holes when resin heats up and it sets in a pressure pot alone. I've also had problems trying to treat big 3D objects like this with a layer of cactus juice or thin resin because some of these cracks are so deep you simply just can't seal the whole thing. It's like trying to create a perfect perfect seal around this whole project, whole item, and you will get air bubbles streaming out of some corner. The thick-set fathom resin is really important because it takes so long to set up, 2-3 days usually at room temperature. That allows plenty of time for it to seep into the wood and get the air bubbles out as well. And then the final step is, without disturbing the project, I take this whole liner from the vacuum chamber, transfer it over to the pressure pot, and let it spend the majority of the time in the pressure pot, about 3 days. I keep it hooked up to my air compressor that's got a regulator on there so you can set the pressure on both the pressure pot and the air compressor. So it's I usually somewhere between 40 and 50 psi, and just let it sit. And by the time that thing's done, it is perfection. I'm so happy with this process. Bubbles are not my problem anymore. And if you've watched if you've watched my previous projects, it has been the absolute bane of my existence. So I'm really, really happy that we found a process that works for the things that I'm doing. There's a lot of other tricks you can use for tables and thinner pours that work great, like a blowtorch to the surface, which gets bubbles out and all that, sure. But if you're trying to do clear resin and have it in a vase where you're going to see through it and have light shining through it, it has to be absolute perfection, or you'll see tiny little bubbles, little defects. And this is it, folks. I'm sure there's another way to skin this cat, but this process solves the waste of resin. It solves bubbles from both micro bubbles from mixing, bubbles escaping from wood when the resin heats up and sets, and so on. So both play a role, and they're different roles, both the vacuum chamber and the pressure pot, and that's really important. Didn't remember ever finding a YouTube video out there when I was learning this that pointed that out. And yeah, so there you are. Now, here's one downside. I'm a wuss. I got to get up on the table to lift this whole thing. It's pretty heavy. I mean, that's 10 gallons of sand and resin. I can barely get it from one thing to the other. And thank heavens they engineered those handles inside the liner. Otherwise, this wouldn't work. So anyway, thank you so much for your support. Every time you subscribe, watch my videos, and share them, it helps me raise more and more money for Operation Underground Railroad. Come join us over at Art for O.U.R. and make an order or a donation, or if you're an artist, we'd love to see your donations, whether they're good level paintings or sketches or woodworking, turning, bowls, whatever it is. We could use your support. We'd love to sell your items and help raise money. So come find us, and we'll see you on the next project. Thank you so much.